In this video, we'll look at using step logic to jump to different parts of a sequence. This sequence will play a sweep out of an amplifier, record it on a reference mic, then give you an option for what type of analysis to run. This message step on number 3 will ask you to enter a number between 1 and 5, and depending on what you select, we'll jump to different parts of the sequence. The possible tests are frequency response and sensitivity, THD, and rub and buzz. When we run the sequence, we enter a value, click enter, and it will jump to what we have selected. That's done by these limit steps after the message step. Step number 3 outputs an integer called logic number. I entered 1 when I applied that step, so that number 1 will be running through these logic steps. This first step has a lower limit of 0.5 and an upper limit of 1.5, so if you enter 1, this step will pass. If we look at the logic of the step, if it passes, it will jump right to step number 10, which will give us the frequency response. It will skip over steps 5 through 9. Step 10 will give us the frequency response, step 11 will give us the sensitivity, and then we'll run through another limit step. This has the same exact lower and upper limits. If the number was 1, this step will pass. If we look at this logic, it will jump on fail to the final display. Because it was 1 and it passes though, it will continue on to the next step, which will analyze the THD. This step has no logic in it, but again, we then have another limit step. The upper and lower limits here are different. This will only pass if the number is 3. We have 1, so the step will fail. But what we did here was instead of jumping on fail, is we actually jump on pass. Because this step failed, it will not jump and will instead run the rub and buzz step. Because we can have multiple numbers by the time we get to step 14, we want to change from jumping on failing to jumping on passing. This will make a little bit more sense when we look at different numbers we could have selected. After the rub and buzz step, it will just give us the final display and there's no other logic involved. So let's actually run the sequence. I'll select 1, and over here in the graph, I have the frequency response in green, the THD in yellow, the rub and buzz in red, and the sensitivity in the table. But now let's look at what happens if we didn't select 1. If I selected 2, the first limit would have failed, and it would jump to this limit step. Again, 2 will just run the frequency response and sensitivity. This jumps on pass to step number 10. This is the same behavior that the previous limit step had. The difference is step 12 failed. Step 12 was looking for exactly number 1, which we didn't enter, so when this failed, it jumped to the final display and did not run THD or rub and buzz measurements. If I selected 3, it will only run THD. So now steps 4 and 5 failed, but step 6 passes with the number 3. When this step passes, it now jumps to step number 13. Step number 13 is the THD analysis. So it runs the THD and then gets fed into step number 14. We saw step 14 when we entered number 1 to run all the tests. When 3 is entered, it will jump on pass to the final display and not run the rub and buzz. Entering 4 is fairly simple. This limit step is set to pass at step 15. Step 15 runs, and then it shows the display. There's no other logic. If we choose number 5 though, it will run both THD and rub and buzz. This is again a result of step number 14. There's 3 possible numbers that will enter step 14. 1, which will run all of the tests, 3, which will just run THD, and 5, which will run THD plus rub and buzz. So the logic here will be go to rub and buzz on 1 or 5, skip rub and buzz if 3 is entered. When 5 is entered here, it fails, and it will have the same behavior as if 1 was entered. It will not jump to the final display, and it will include the rub and buzz measurements.